You're listening to Opera Box Score.
Let's get ready to rumble!
Wherever you are, however you're listening, it's America's talk radio show about opera. It's Opera Box Score. I'm Weston Williams, joined by Oliver Camacho and Ashlee Hardgrave. All right, this week, in addition to everything else that's happening in the world, there's a war on opera. We go inside the huddle with librettist and war correspondent Caitlin Vincent, author of Opera Wars, Inside the World of Opera and the Battle for Its Future. And then in Listener Mailbag, an OBS fan asks, is Caleb Williams the Pavarotti of football? Well, glad Ashlee's here to help us answer that one. Plus, in the 2 Minute Drill, WNO has officially abandoned the sinking ship that is the Kennedy Center, and a Heritage Foundation flunkie is set to head the NEA. Make sure you subscribe to our podcast on Spotify, click follow on Apple Podcasts, hit the plus sign. You can also stream episodes of OBS every Saturday at 10 a.m. Central at amplisoundsradio.com. Email us your hot takes by writing to mailbag@operaboxscore.com or upload a voice memo using the You Got Something to Say tab on our website, operaboxscore.com. However you contribute, you'll get an OBS beer coaster, an OBS lapel pin, and a #1 OBS fan foam finger just for sharing your own hot take. Now, Oliver, I don't know if you listened to the episode that I put my resolutions in post for last week, but one of my resolutions was to be less mean about tennis, so you're welcome.
Well, luckily for you, the Australian Open doesn't start till next week, but I have a little story which I'm sure Ashlee is going to take my lead from. I was at a party, a celebrate the end of the holidays party on Saturday, and the host had her big screen TV on the Bears game, and everybody was glued to this game. And when the Packers scored in the fourth quarter, stretching their lead, I was like, this is why I don't watch football. It's so disappointing. And so I literally left the party after.
You did not? Did you really? That's so funny.
And I didn't know what happened until the next morning when I looked at my phone.
Well, Ashlee Hardgrave, what did happen after Oliver left the party?
About 7 more cardiac arrests happened after that. I was at my neighborhood bar, the Irish Nobleman, because they always do a great Bears hosting, and it was just jam-packed full of strangers. And when the game was officially over and it was clear that the Bears had beat the Packers, I was hoisted in the air by a complete stranger who was standing next to me. I didn't even mind. I wasn't even mad. It was great. I also met some very drunk young women in the bathroom who said that they manifested the Bears win, and whatever. I'm glad it worked.
Yeah.
I saw them after the game and they were like, see, manifest. I'm like, yes, actually. Chicago had quite a sports weekend. So within a few hours on Saturday, the Blackhawks, which is our hockey team, for those of you that aren't familiar, won their game in a complete shutout. The Bulls, which is the NBA team, beat Dallas Mavericks. And then, there was that football game that we're talking about. I also want to talk about the sort of meme and clip that keeps happening where people are showing actual people grating cheese with cheese graters, like real cheese in the stadium, which is hilarious. But I also want to know about how they got those cheese graters past security, because I've been to those games at Soldier Field. Security is tight. And in more football news, because we can't have enough, we have one for Matt, who's not here with us this week. Just right before recording, Mike Tomlin, who is the longtime coach of the Pittsburgh Steelers, announced that he was stepping down, ending his 19-year run. He never had a losing season while he was with the Steelers. We're all big fans, but we're bigger fans of the Bears, and we're going to talk more about that shortly.
We're going to talk more about Da Bears later in the show, so let's talk da opera.
Huddle up. Let's go inside the huddle.
We're recording on January 13th, which is the official release date of the book everybody in the industry is reading right now. It's called Opera Wars, Inside the World of Opera and the Battles for Its Future. It's written by librettist Caitlin Vincent. We have a lengthy interview with Caitlin, so I won't delay any longer. Before we go to the interview, let's listen to some of Caitlin's work as a librettist. The song Thanks a Latte, with music by Lori Laitman, performed by friend of the show Laura Strickling and pianist Daniel Schlossberg, from their album 40 at 40.
Today's the day I'm taking a stand, making an impression, regular habit. Every day at the hipster cafe. Every day with a cute barista. For 3 whole seconds, I have his complete attention.
Earlier this week, Opera Wars, Inside the World of Opera and the Battles for Its Future was published by, what is this publisher, Caitlin?
Scribner.
By Scribner.
An imprint of Simon & Schuster.
There you go. A lot of people have had advanced copies. I had an opportunity to have an advanced copy and have read most of it. It's highly enjoyable, and I want everybody listening to find themselves a copy. Will there be an audiobook?
There is an audiobook, and
Okay.
I had to tell you, Oliver, I got to audition the voices, and I said, which voice sounds like they could tell a joke about tenors? And that is how I decided. So there is an audiobook coming out.
So today we are talking to the author of Opera Wars, Caitlin Vincent. Welcome to Opera Box Score.
Hi, Oliver. It's so great to be here.
So Caitlin, you're also a librettist, and you're on Laura Strickling's album, your song Thanks a Latte, a hilarious song. I also just learned that you wrote text for a work by Rafael Fusco, a personal friend of mine, love songs from the third floor. Is that what it's called?
From a third floor walk
From a
up.
third floor walk up.
Yeah.
And some of you might have heard the opera Computing Venus, for which you wrote the libretto, composed by Timothy Tkach.
Yep.
So there are many access points, but I think for a lot of people, they're going to first learn about you through this book, which is written in a very breezy style. And really, it's just been, I'm not really good at like concentrating on books, but it's been really enjoyable read.
Amazing.
Can you describe for the listeners, since obviously, unless they already bought their advanced copy too, what is the main thesis of Opera Wars?
Yes. So in addition to being a librettist and an opera researcher, I was a soprano. So I lived the business for a long time. And I also ran a small opera company in Baltimore. So in a lot of ways, this book is me really grappling with my love-hate relationship with the opera industry because, you know, it's such an amazing art form and it pulls people in, but it's also dysfunctional and complex and even toxic in some ways. And so a lot of people in the industry have a love-hate relationship with it. So in this book, I really was just articulating that complexity. You know, why is the industry so messy? What are all these pressure points? Where are the tensions? What are people fighting about? Because people fight about opera a lot, often in the audience or in the lobby. So I break down the book into 8 different battlegrounds. And this is really a way for me to tackle this monster of a field, because I think one of the reasons why it's so difficult to talk about what's going on in opera is that it's so complicated. There's so many different fights happening at once. So the first battleground I look at is the score, this historical score, and the question of how faithful do we have to be to long dead composers and librettists? What are the tensions that come out of that? Then I shift to looking at staging, which is a very big controversial battleground about how operas are supposed to be staged. What happens when you bring a stage director into the mix who decides they're going to, not have Carmen die at the end, or they're going to set La Boheme in outer space? Then I look at casting, which is a really tricky thing right now. Who's supposed to be cast for certain kinds of characters? Who's allowed to be cast? What does that look like when we're looking at employment opportunities? And then I shift backstage. And this is where things get really interesting when we're talking about the dysfunction of the industry and how it's trying to survive. So I look at rehearsal rooms, rehearsal room dynamics. I look at company finances. This is a slightly bleak chapter, I have to say, just a little bleak. I think a single tear falls down the cheek of every art administrator when they read that chapter. And then I look at the career path for singers. And then finally, I end by looking at the broader culture of the industry when it comes to historical works, the canon, versus new works, the kinds of works that I actually write.
Well, I think that we probably could have you on a couple of times to talk about those various chapters, but we're going to dig into the idea of staging and especially of yellowface, which is a topic that is very interesting to me. But I want to go back to just like the opening premise that a lot of people love opera and are passionate about it. And for somebody like you, and actually for somebody like me, I also ran a small opera company and I'm also a trained singer. I know that there are experiences in the theater that I will, and also in rehearsal, actually, rehearsing a work, but also experiencing a work from the audience perspective. There are experiences that will forever be encrypted into my brain, into my heart, that were just so incredible that I will never forget them. And I will always associate, a bar of music or a phrase with a performer or with a set design or with, something that I can remember about the performance will always stick with me if it was that good. Opera has the ability to do that. But also that, people tend to put us all together in one lot, people who like opera. And I meet opera fans all the time, and I figure out right away that we're not going to get along as people.
I'm not that kind of opera fan. Well, this is one thing is there is this idea, you either like opera or you hate it. But it was really important to me to write a book that was not just for the people who have already drunk the opera Kool-Aid, right? Like I'm an insider. I love opera. I've committed my life to it. But I also want to bring people into it. There are these stigmas around opera that it's elite, it's snobby, it's on this pedestal. And of course, when you raise the curtain, like it's a hot mess. That's literally a quote from the book. It's a hot mess, but that makes it more likable. So I wanted to push it off the pedestal and say, okay, you've always been curious about this. You've heard, the Barber of Seville in the pasta sauce commercial. Let me just come with me. I'm going to show you around all the dysfunction and the crazy that's happening. And you don't actually need to have a master's of music to read this book. You do not need to have access to a musical dictionary. I wanted it to be for a wide audience because that's the thing is the future of opera is not that everyone has to like every opera. It can be a spectrum, but we do need people to actually try it so they can have those transformative moments like the ones you're talking about, which I think all of us have, like a little file cabinet of those really precious moments that are like, yes, that was it. I'm going to go back to try to find that again. And they're often very rare, those moments, but they really show what the art form can be and why people are so passionate about it.
I mean, that's it. I mean, thankfully, my work allows me to attend a lot of opera and I don't have to pay for tickets. So I may see, 40 shows a year and maybe I will cry once all year.
Yeah.
Okay. We're going to dig into one of the earlier chapters about staging. And what I love about this book, as you've already stated pretty clearly, is that this book is not necessarily for the industry experts. It's really a way for people who want to learn more about opera broadly. But a term that we throw around a lot here on OBS is Regietheater. And I guess I just assume that people know what that means. And I love the way you explain it. So can we just do a definition of terms? What is Regietheater? And the other term that I'd never heard before, Werktreue.
Werktreue, yes. Okay, so this is one of the big battlegrounds that speaks to how our opera is supposed to be staged. And supposed, here I'm using quotation marks. How are they supposed to be staged? So Regie, I'm gonna say it like a really Midwestern American. Regietheater translates from the German as director's theater. And it really emerged in the 1920s. And essentially it's this idea that the stage director came in and traditionally they were kind of just doing everything that was in the score as was written. So it's set in a forest, therefore I'm going to stage it in a forest. Then you had these stage directors come in who said, actually, you know what? I'm going to add some additional layers of meaning to this. I'm going to set it in a different place. I'm going to add my own artistic voice to this musical score. So Regietheater is when directors do that. So it's conceptual. It often adds new layers of meaning to the work through the staging. It can sometimes undermine the original meaning of the work. It can reframe characters. It can rearrange things. So you can see why some traditional opera lovers would immediately say, oh my God. And this is why in impolite circles, Regie Theater is also known as Eurotrash. Now, the other side of the battleground is Werktreue, which roughly translated means fidelity to the work or fidelity to the original. And this is this idea that there is a right way to stage an opera like La Bohème or Carmen, and there are many wrong ones. And the right way is very much embedded in the musical score, so the printed music and text. Now, I think you and I actually fall on different sides of this debate a little bit, maybe, but that's okay. We can still be friends, Oliver. But this idea is that,
no, I figured we can't in the first 30 seconds.
No, can't be friends. It's done. It's done. But so this idea that it has to be staged a certain way, but that does bring up a lot of complications because, of course, a physical musical score does not translate to a performance. You can't take pages and suddenly be like, and boom, now it's exactly as it was intended by the composer and the librettist. So we already have sort of some tension into how do you actually stage it the right way when, let's say, I don't know, we now have electric stage lighting and we didn't have it when a lot of these composers were writing it, right? So those are kind of the two big battlegrounds, and people get very upset and very angry. And there are a lot of op-eds online about, oh, Regie Theater is the death of opera and Werktreue is the death of opera, and they fight.
Well, it strikes me that both of these terms come from the German, where there is a lot of opera and every town has its own opera company, sometimes two, sometimes three. And so opera is part of the cultural diet, I assume. I don't live there. And so they are used to seeing the great works, and maybe they've seen them by the time they turn 30. They've already seen it so many times that they're more open to a new interpretation.
Absolutely. Well, that's the thing about Regie Theater. Because it's conceptual, because it adds new layers of meaning, there is this assumption that you are already familiar with the original. It's a form of adaptation, basically. I'm going to take the La Bohème and I'm going to move it around. But of course, in order to understand what layers of meaning have been added, you need to know what the original was like. Now, in a sector like the US, where we don't have that culture of opera attendance and we don't have a tiny opera company in every tiny town, sometimes people going to see La Bohème will have never seen it before. They'll have no frame of reference. So there is this concern of, well, are they actually seeing La Bohème? Is that they're not actually seeing the real thing? Like, we're going to lose that original. I think that there is often some fear that if Regie Theater takes off, we'll lose something.
Can you describe Klaus Guth's Bohème that you talk about in this chapter of the book?
Yes. It's a production I was following when it came out, and it was really interesting. So this is a production that premiered at the Paris Opera in 2017, I believe, and it is highly conceptual. This is not a La Bohème that is set in 1830s Paris as it's supposed to be, allegedly. Instead, he sets it on a spaceship that is in the middle of a disaster. They're running out of oxygen. And so essentially, the entire plot is basically a hallucination from oxygen deprivation. Our four roommates are not artists and poets. They are astronauts facing their imminent doom. And spoiler, the spaceship crashes and Rodolfo dies of oxygen deprivation. And Mimi is not even real. She's a hallucination. So you can see why that production riled up some traditional audience members. So I spoke to Klaus, I interviewed him for this book, and he told me that at the premiere, there were audience members who were actually like physically pushing him, and that the conductor had to stop the orchestra because people were booing so loudly that the singers couldn't hear the orchestra. It was just, it was like, I know, it's 9 years ago. It's like amazing. Welcome to opera, everyone. This is the show we want to see.
Okay, so as you hinted, maybe I am on a different side of the coin as you in terms of what my preferences are. But let me say this, that the majority of my work as a assistant stage director and let's say stage director and as a singer has been in historically informed Baroque opera. Yeah. And from my mentor, I learned that these operas have all this music in it because there were things that were expected to happen in the music. Like you see some of these like long introductions or like, ritornellos.
It's a dance.
Yeah, that's a dance, or it's a chance for the singer to, make a big S curve on the stage and show off their costume. And that there was expected to be like gesture to underscore the meanings of the words, since the audience didn't speak the language of the opera. Like especially in London, you see Handel operas in Italian. So the British had some basic vocabulary of Italian, but the singers really supported the affect of the piece in question through their physicality. And there are some traditions of the staging, such as the 3-act structure, and how, since it was candlelit, by the end of the first hour, you would expect there to be darkness on stage. And so how do we use the darkness as part of the story, And all those things begin to make so much sense. Also, the thing that gets me the most is the idea of hierarchy and how, noble characters, or the most, aristocratic characters, the ones with the highest status, have more spaciousness, and they should have spaciousness on the stage, and they should have spaciousness in the music. It's all meant to indicate to you this person has a little tune that you can remember because he's common, and this person has a grand, recitative accompagnato to give them space around the thing that they want to sing. It's all related to those aspects of it. And when you begin to respect those things, then things make sense. But the moment you start like trying to reinterpret, like, oh, this is too much music, what am I going to do? Let's put in some action here that doesn't have nothing to do with the piece in question. And then there's a fight. And to me, that's when I get really impatient. Or when they take out dances.
Oh, yeah. Yes. Well, and look, let me say, I'm on the fence with this particular battleground. I've seen plenty of really terrible Reggie Theater productions. I've also seen plenty of really terrible traditional productions. Because what makes a successful production is when the concept makes sense. It makes sense with the music. It makes sense with the characters, even if it is highly conceptual, even if it adds a different layer of meaning. Like, for example, really great recent production of Madame Butterfly that was directed by Matthew Ozawa. So Madame Butterfly, traditionally set in Japan, right? And it comes with baggage, which I do get into in the book. But in Matthew's version with his design team, he sets it as a VR world. So it is a VR fantasy of Pinkerton, who's essentially, like a 20-something gamer. So everything is elevated. So that, to me, is an example of Reggie Theater, right? That is not the traditional staging, the traditional meaning that Puccini wrote, but it's a highly effective production because the concept has integrity, it's cohesive, and it aligns to the music and the score, right? But also, and of course, I could stand on a soapbox about this forever. I wrote an entire book about it because I have strong enough feelings. But we have to remember that opera has never just been the score. I know some people like to just listen to it, or they'll have their eyes closed and they don't care about the staging. But it has always been a combination of music, text, and theater. So when we start to restrict the creativity and the artistic vision of the theater side, of the stage director, I think that we get into a bit of trouble. I think we start to limit the art form, especially when it comes to works that we've seen and have been produced thousands and thousands and thousands of times. We don't want it to become a museum. We need it to still be dynamic. So
can I ask
yeah, go ahead.
We got to the topic that I wanted to get to. Can you tell us what are the problems with Madame Butterfly, and how does Matthew Ozawa's production try to solve that problem? And I'd also like to hear about 3 other productions that you've investigated.
Oliver, I thought you only had 30 minutes.
I know, we have 10 minutes left.
What are the problems with Madame Butterfly? Look, so there are problems in the score. Like, it is a historical artifact, right? It is a reflection of its time, written by white European men, of course, so from the 19th century. So we can recognize the work as a historical artifact in that way. So views of, for the time, what were other distant exotic lands. Of course, we're going to have some inherent racism, some cultural appropriation. They are a product of their time.
Ping, pang,
right?
and pong, for example.
Yeah, exactly. Ping, pang, and pong. So in Madame Butterfly, we have pseudo-Japanese. We have very stereotypical archetypes in terms of Cho-Cho-san is a very specific kind of exoticized character that was very common at the time. And we have melodies in there that are, not exactly authentic.
From
right?
a music
Again,
box, right? Like
yes, the music box. And then there's a song about eggplants in there So we have the problems with the score. Then where things get really tricky is when we talk about the traditional staging practices. So again, when Madame Butterfly was premiered, the traditional staging practices involved an entirely white cast of singers who needed to be dressed up to make them look like they lived in the world of the stage, which was Japan. So what did that mean? That meant kimonos, that meant geisha wigs, winged eyeliners, which at the time was, it's a very common form of cosmetic yellow face. So this idea of like sort of the geisha figure, again, this exact makeup was used at that time. So over time, that staging tradition has continued to be associated with that work. But this is where we get into trouble because for many people, even just wearing a kimono, trying to use costumes and staging and makeup to appear to be an ethnicity that you are not, like this is deeply problematic. This is something that doesn't really happen in other fields right now without a lot of outrage and discussion. So one of the problems with Madame Butterfly is when is it yellow face in an offensive way and when is it not, right? If you don't put winged eyeliner on a white soprano, is it okay? Can she still wear a kimono? Can she still wear wigs? People disagree about what is actually yellow face in that context, and this is where we get into trouble. So what do we do with it? What do we do with Madame Butterfly when we have this problematic historical score, we have this outdated staging tradition, and yet we need to program Madame Butterfly because it still brings in a lot of ticket revenue. Companies rely on Madame Butterfly. So my goodness, what are they?
I still cry, and I've seen it already like a dozen times.
Oh, then the music is stunning, and so you can just sort of see the beads of perspiration breaking out on the faces of the arts administrators, being like, "Oh my God, what do we do with Madame Butterfly? We have to do it." So one of the things that we're seeing is we are seeing very careful discussions around, first of all, casting. Who are we going to cast as Cho-Cho-san? And, how are we going to stage them? But then we're also seeing a very close look at who is on the creative team. So who is the director? Who are the designers? Who is choosing how to interpret that work for the modern day? So then again, that's that third prong of opera, this staging. It's really, really important because for a work like Madame Butterfly, those people are the only ones that are alive. They are speaking to us now. They are a product of this society. So with that Matthew Ozawa production, we saw a really interesting take on Madame Butterfly that was designed to resolve some of those challenges through staging, through this new conceptualization. There have been a number of other recent productions that I talk about in the book. One of them was director Phil Chan's production for Boston Lyric Opera, which he sets in 1940s San Francisco Chinatown, and then in Japanese concentration camps in Act 2 and Act 3. Then there are other ones, where we see the son of Pinkerton and Madame Butterfly as an adult, and we're sort of going back through time. So there are a lot of directors and designers who are trying to figure out how to salvage this work, how to reframe it for a modern day audience, and still keep the integrity of this. I don't want to say I'm not sure it's a love story. I'd say it's like a one-sided love story to keep the integrity of that work, but it's very difficult. And at a certain point, you have to say, well, maybe we should just, program more new works, and then we don't have to bend over backwards so much just to.
But then people don't come.
Butterfly. Yeah, but then allegedly people don't come. But it's a balance. So what do you do with it? It's a real challenge. Yeah. It's very tricky.
I mean, I'll say that I attend a lot, and there's always something to learn by looking at the audience and the reaction. And I see, I go to the opera and I see like an updated version of a one of the benchmark pieces of the repertoire, and I look around and I see these people coming who are clearly there at the opera for their first time, and they were expecting spectacle, they were expecting grand costumes, they were expecting everything to be just luxurious, and instead you get this other thing, and they don't have the reference point, so they think that this is what it is. And some might say that this reimagination was for them, so that's relevant to them. But in fact, their preconceived notions about opera were different, and they're not getting satisfied either. So you've now alienated the legacy audience, and you've disappointed the audience who thought they were coming in to get whatever La Boheme on Paris rooftop.
It's true, but also, I mean, I think you strike on a really important point. This idea of the assumptions that it is spectacle, that it's glamour, it's tuxedos. We're going to dress up and go to the opera and bring our monocles, practically, right? But that model of opera, that's 150 years old. We do not write 5-act operas with elephants and choruses of 100. That those are not modern day stories, right? So I think there's also an educational aspect of it from companies that aligns with this idea of advancing new works, because the operas that are actually being written and have been written, especially in the last 20 years, they're calling it the golden age of American opera. I mean, those are stories that can connect with audiences. It's just we have to push back this idea that opera is this kind of stilted thing where the snow always falls in Act 3 and there's going to be lavish sequins. Not that I don't love a lavish sequined gown, Oliver. I'm a soprano. Of course I do. But it's true. But you have different audiences. There are different factions in the audience. So how do you please all of them? Yeah. Again, this is where I'm sympathetic to companies because they are in a tight spot.
Well, my 2026 resolution was to call out the preponderance of gay white men in leadership roles in the opera world. And I'm going scorched earth in 2026. And I want to say something that I read in this chapter that really resonated with me was that the white stage director will never have to question why they got hired. And they can make a mistake and it won't be, the board of directors and the administration won't blame the director's race for being a factor. Can you say a little more about that? So
So, and I should say that is a quote that comes from Phil Chan, who I interviewed for this book about his experiences, because he's also a big advocate, against the use of yellowface in these traditional works. But it's when you look at the actual employment data, which I have, in terms of who is actually being hired for which kinds of productions, we see that there is clear pigeonholing happening. So companies are hiring Black directors and Asian directors, but they're hiring them for very specific kinds of works, often the ones that have this baggage, this racial baggage.
You solve the problem.
Yeah, and they're not hired for other things. Mm-hmm. So it's just sort of reiterating the problem of tokenizing, and it does bring that question: okay, so you have to do Madame Butterfly, and you ideally want to have someone Asian on the creative team to give you political cover. Right. But it's icky. It's icky. And it's not true diversity in the field. It's not true diversity of voices, because also it assumes that one tiny facet of your identity, we contain multitudes. Right. Just because you're Asian doesn't mean that it's an Asian take on Madame Butterfly. That's offensive. Right. It is your take. You are a person with many different identities. So that is something I talk about, that ick of pigeonholing and this identity, the identity politics of creative teams, which is really complicated.
Well, I mean, I have so many stories to tell on that front, but save it for another time. I have one big question for you, but I wanted to close this topic off with just your chance to champion a Regie Theater version of something. We already talked about the Ozawa Butterfly, but is there another production that comes to mind that you really think that the director did add something that the audience, you appreciated and you feel like the audience appreciated?
Well, I don't know if you're familiar with the 1927 and Komische Opera Berlin production of The Magic Flute, which came out of 2012. So it's an older
Kosky, you mean?
With Barry Kosky and Susanne Andrade from the animation company. So it is Regie Theater in that it is an entirely digital production. It has digital sets, it has digital characters, it has performers as well. But it is a really effective production because the concept is airtight. Everything is so highly choreographed, and it appears to be interactive. So you have Papageno getting drunk, drinking out of a digital straw, and the liquid in the cup goes down as he drinks, and it's digital, right? So It's not set in a dungeon basement like you might imagine with a Reggie Theater pre-production. No one's wearing gorilla costumes. It still has integrity. There's a clear artistic vision. But that is not the traditional staging of the magic flute, right? There's no Masonic imagery. There's no, beautiful gown for the Queen of the Night. She's literally a digital spider throwing knives at her daughter. So it can be really effective. And it can really reach an audience. And I think, why would we want to limit ourselves when the field is trying to bring people in? Let's throw everything we can to get more people in the door.
Well, I didn't leave us a lot of time for this last question, so maybe that's good for you too. But through the lens of the opera battlegrounds, as you've laid out in Opera Wars, can you sort of interpret what's happening at Detroit Opera right now? So I know you don't have any personal relationship.
I'm not in the room. I'm not in the room. I don't know the specifics, but I know that we see this tension happening at every opera company everywhere, which is this tension between the art, like the artistic vision, and the commercial necessity. Opera never makes enough money to cover its expenses from ticket sales. Its tickets are 15%, 20%, 25%. The rest is from government grants or donors, often members of the board. So there's always this battle between what the artistic vision is of someone who's in that seat versus what the board of directors thinks it should be. And then you have, the weigh-in from the executive director, who's often in charge of the money side of things. So finding that balance, it's very difficult. We see that the formula, especially when it comes to a balance between, let's say, contemporary work or more avant-garde staging, like we saw at Detroit Opera, the balance of that with sort of the canonical works we're used to being staged in the usual way, it can be a very tricky thing. And this is often where we will see leadership spill and fill, where the leadership will be booted out or say, we are leaving with, best wishes, warmest regards, which is, of course, basically what the press release for Detroit Opera says. So we don't know exactly what happened, but money is a problem. And when you are being adventuresome and you are doing experimentation and trying to build a new audience, it can be very expensive. It can be very risky. And sometimes, boards are not necessarily going to be supportive of that, especially if they really prefer a more conservative or traditional take. I'm being a little diplomatic, but I think you're reading between the lines here.
No, I largely agree with you, but I also blame the board for not really understanding what they bought. Like, Yuval Sharon did not change. He did not change.
You know what you're getting. Yeah, he's been consistent. Yeah, very consistent.
He wrote a book about it. Burn the opera house down.
He wrote a book about it. Yes, read mine first, and then you can read his. But that's the thing is, but once it's in practice and you see what's happening, and then you see the numbers that are coming in, and the interpersonal dynamics can also be a problem here, and how you're dealing with the board. I mean, it's a lot of kind of behind the scenes negotiation, and it is a difficult thing. It's almost like a corporate setting. You are not the boss if you're an artistic director. You report to the board, but they have their own agenda and their own vision for what they think a company should be. And in this case, it did not line up. So it's going to be interesting to see who they choose to bring in and how the direction of the company changes.
Opera Wars, Inside the World of Opera and the Battles for Its Future by Caitlin Vincent was released on January 13th. It's published by Simon & Schuster. Caitlin, thank you so much for being our guest.
Thank you, Oliver.
And as we were recording this interview, Caitlin was at the National Opera Association conference in Boston. And there are so many pictures of her with famous people. I think she saw Peter Sellers there. I think Denise Graves was there, and everybody's reading this book. So now you got to be like Peter and Denise and get your copy.
If you are interested in reading more books, you can always subscribe to our podcast. We do talk about them sometimes because we are very learned. On Spotify, click follow. On Apple Podcasts, hit the plus sign. And in the meantime, if you have some objection or some notes for us, you can always send us something so we can read it on Listener Mailbag.
Yeah, you got something to say? Then yeah, all right, you can say something. This is Listener Mailbag.
This mailbag comes to us by way of my email inbox from my new online bestie and Bears fan, David of Concord, New Hampshire. Subject line, Da Bears and Opera. Dear Miss Hardgrave, I am writing to you as a longtime Bears fan, beginning opera singer in my late 70s, and wildly enthusiastic fan of Opera Box Score. The tie-ins between the Bears season and opera deserve exploration in the premier opera and sports podcast. Thank you very much, especially after Saturday's game. I learned the true pain of being a Bear fan way back in 1956, yes, that long ago, when my heroes swept through the regular season and then got crushed by the Giants on an icy Yankee Stadium field. Perhaps because George Halas was too cheap to get the right shoes. I experienced disappointment and disillusionment worthy of Cho-Cho-san or Gilda. Yes, very familiar, Dave. There are many similarities between opera and this Bear season. There's passion, violence, human triumph, villainy, and clan rivalry. Think Packers, all expressed with grace and beauty on stage and on the gridiron. Is not Caleb Williams the Pavarotti of the NFL? I thought of the Force of Destiny with all of its wild plot turns, or how about Trovatore with the Bears' offensive line pounding out the running game in an anvil chorus all their own. Maybe Romeo and Juliet for clan rivalries, or Figaro as Ryan Poles, the consummate arranger who makes it all come out right in the end, no matter how many complications he has to manage. Dave, you are speaking my language, honey. In the end, I think the best operatic fit for the Bears is Aida. You've got the McCaskies, also known as the royal family, hiring Radames and their Ben Johnson to conquer the Ethiopians, who are the Packers. And this season, as it draws to a close, this opera as well, Johnson is trapped in the tomb of past Bears mistakes and collapses. Will he escape and lead the Bears to glory, or will he expire in the tomb of Bears orthodoxy and ineptitude? If he escapes, will it be to the tune of that most glorious of anthems, Bear Down, Chicago Bears? I love your show. You're the best. I hope to hear something about our Bears this week. Bear Down. Well, Dave,
Good
yes,
news.
you absolutely heard things about the Bears this week.
I didn't know we were going to have two writers on the podcast this week.
Let me tell you, Dave, I don't know when I'm going to find myself in New Hampshire, but when I do, you and I are having a beer and singing Bear Down, because this is the most wonderful, wonderful comparison. It just delighted me. We know how Aida ends, and that kind of bums me out because, the Bears have at least one more game to play this week. But excellent, excellent comparison. Gentlemen, your thoughts?
I think it's spot on. I mean, again, Oliver doesn't know any of these things because he did miss the important part of the game. But there is a certain drama to this season specifically. I've even heard speculations on the internet that if the Bears win this season, it will cause a rift in the space-time continuum that will fix everything that's gone wrong since the Cubs won the series back in 2016.
That is correct.
So, I mean,
in October of 2016. Yes.
I mean, if it fixes it, I'm down either way. Go Bears, as they say.
I guess the only player that I know is Caleb Williams. He's the quarterback, right?
He's the Pavarotti, yes.
Yeah, and he's married to Simone Biles, or they're just...
No, that is Jonathan Owens, who's a lineman who is married to Simone Biles,
okay.
Yes.
If it's not tennis, Oliver doesn't know about it.
No, but are we saying that Caleb Williams is as reliable as Pavarotti, or that he pulls it out in the end? Like, I'm not quite sure about the comparison there.
I mean, I think it could be a little bit of either. Caleb Williams is very quickly becoming a superstar because he is pulling off these superhuman tricks seemingly out of nowhere in ways that no one deemed would even be possible. And I think Pavarotti at his height kind of did the superhuman with his voice. So
that's why I needed that explainer. So I buy that. Okay.
Happy to do it. And one more thing to make us love Caleb Williams even more is that he is frustrating a whole lot of men with his bending of the ideas of masculinity because he paints his nails. He often has themes on them. He has things that say bear down. Sometimes he has tributes to like other causes that are on his nails. And there there are some men that are big mad and big uncomfortable and big upset with it. And that delights me almost as much as his incredible arm.
Because it's a slippery slope to becoming transgender, right?
Yeah, well, and for those idiots, I want to remind them that his mother is a former nail tech, and so that's kind of where all of this started. Also, men can paint their nails. Calm down. You'd rather complain about some man that's better than you than go to therapy. Give it a minute.
Truly. Well, if you want to send us an equally poetic letter about what sport is what opera, please do. You can write us at mailbag@operaboxscore.com. You can also use the You Got Something to Say tab at our website, operaboxscore.com, or apparently you can just email Ashlee personally and we'll read it on the show. Whatever works. Let's go to the 2-minute drill.
This just in. The 2-minute drill.
All right, listen up. Here's everything you need to know about what happened in Operaland this week.
Washington National Opera is leaving the Kennedy Center, its home since 1971, citing new financial policies. The center's new model requires productions to be fully funded in advance, which WNO says is not feasible with their traditional mix of ticket sales, grants, and donations. The company emphasized the amicable nature of the decision and plans to explore new venues while maintaining its artistic mission.
Which seemed to be quite the surprise to Kennedy Center's executive director, Richard Grinnell, who claims he broke up with them. The injured Dick took to Twitter and said, "The Trump Kennedy Center has made the decision to end the all caps exclusive partnership with the Washington Opera so that we can have the flexibility and funds to bring in operas from around the world and across the U.S. Having an all caps exclusive relationship has been extremely expensive and limiting in choice and variety."
WNO aren't the only ones leaving the Kennedy Center lineup. Composer Stephen Schwartz said that he would not appear at a gala meant to honor Francesca Zambello, probably not happening anymore. Jazz septet The Cookers, the dance company Doug Verone and Dancers, and folk singer Christy Lee have all recently pulled out, many at high financial cost. Meanwhile, a move-on petition calling on donors to withdraw their financial support of the center has garnered over 101,000 signatures as of the time of this recording.
That's a lot of signatures. Marianne Carter has been confirmed chair of the National Endowment for the Arts, a reappointment to this position since the first Trump administration. Despite her prior involvement with the Heritage Foundation, Carter had a reputation as a relatively moderate advocate for the NEA, despite calls from the president to eliminate the agency during his first term. Her Senate confirmation vote in December was along party lines.
Holy wow, some good news. In an update to the PR disaster at Vancouver Symphony Orchestra, violinist Esther Wong, who was sexually assaulted by a colleague at the orchestra, has been released from her NDA. Partial credit goes to one of our heroes, Catherine Needleman, whose Change.org petition has garnered almost 15,000 signatures as of this taping, and who has canceled a planned protest. Quote, "What changed here, and I am not forking celebrating this, was not moral clarity. It was public pressure. So I wanted to thank every person who signed the petition. It mattered," said Needleman, adding that none of this would have happened without public embarrassment.
Friend of the show, Lisa Davidson, has officially debuted as Isolde at Barcelona's Gran Teatro del Liceu and Barbara Luch's new production featuring Ekaterina Gubonova, Tomasz Konieczny, and Brindley Sherratt, all conducted by Susanna Melki. Next up, the Met, with friend of the show, Michael Spires.
San Diego Opera announced that Irwin Jacobs has committed $4.5 million to establish the Joan and Irwin Jacobs San Diego Symphony and San Diego Opera Collaboration Fund. The money will support hiring symphony musicians for all SDO performances over the next 3 seasons.
Major awards time. Several classical music luminaries have been made commanders of the Order of the British Empire, including mezzo-soprano Alice Coote and conductor Richard Hayworth-Farnes, former music director of Opera North. Meanwhile, South African baritone Lutando Kave has been awarded the 2026 Birgit Nilsson Stipendium worth 250,000 Swedish krona.
It's got to be at least $5. In trade news, Pittsburgh Opera has announced that General Director Christopher Hahn will retire at the end of this season, while Opera Delaware's General Director Brendan Cook will also step down at the same time. Neither company has chosen a successor. Meanwhile, Portland Opera has appointed Tracy Wenkus as interim General Director following the retirement of Sue Dixon last year, and Paris Opera has named Semyon Bichkov as the new music director starting in 2028.
Exit stage right. Opera director Rhoda Levine has died at age 93. A New York City native, she was an industry giant as both an educator and opera creator. As an opera director, Levine worked at Cape Town, Glimmerglass, New York City, Opera Theater, St. Louis, San Diego Opera, Santa Fe Opera, Belgium's Opera Nationale, Scottish Opera, and San Francisco Operas. She also served as a faculty member at Curtis Institute, Yale School of Drama, Juilliard School, Mannes College, Manhattan School of Music, and Northwestern University.
Austrian soprano and teacher Monika Riedler has died. She specialized in Strauss, Mozart, Smetana, and Offenbach, performing at opera companies across Germany, Austria, the U.S., and Canada. Riedler also served as professor of voice at the Munich University of Music and the St. Pölten Conservatory of Liturgical Music.
French composer Monique Cecconi Botella has died at 89. She won the prestigious Prix de Rome in 1966 and over her career composed several operas, including The Women of the Ogre and Noctuale, as well as children's operas, including Opera Clown and Pirlipip. She also founded the festival seasons of The Voice in Provence in 2008.
Longtime opera executive Bruce Crawford has died at age 96. In his storied association with the Metropolitan Opera, he served as president, chairman, and CEO of the board, as well as the company's 14th general manager. During his time in that position, Crawford focused on overcoming the Met's $8 million deficit through fundraising and cost-cutting, including eliminating the company's long-standing but expensive national tours.
And on this day, January 13th, a couple of premieres for you. 1775 was the first performance of Mozart's opera La Finta Giardiniera, The Feigned Gardener, in Munich. 1873 brought us the first performance of Rimsky-Korsakov's opera Ivan the Terrible, otherwise known as The Maid of Pskov. 1882, German composer Richard Wagner completed his opera Parsifal. Congratulations. In 1910, on this day, was the first experimental live broadcast of opera in New York from the Met Opera stage. It was Mascagni's Cavalleria Rusticana with part of Pagliacci with, Enrico Caruso and Emmy Destin. And on this day in 1976, American conductor Sarah Caldwell and Arkansan, one for me, is the first woman to conduct at the Met. She led a performance of La Traviata.
Birthdays on January 13th include composer Johann Christoph Graupner, born in 1683, another German composer, Gottfried Heinrich Stötzel, born in 1690, Australian music director and composer Leon Francis Victor, who conducted at the Melbourne Opera and the Leicester Grand Italian Opera Company, was born this day in 1850. In 1895, Spanish opera singer and film actor Fortunio Bonanova was born in Mallorca. In 1898, it was the birth of Carlo Tagliabue, the Italian baritone, who created roles in operas by Pizzetti and Respighi. In 1903, American tenor Charles Coleman was born in Connecticut. In 1931, tenor Erwin Wolfhart was born in Nuremberg. Austrian soprano Christiana Sorel was born this day in 1933. Happy birthday to the great Italian baritone Renato Bruzon, born this day in 1936. Happy birthday to tenor Dominique Natoli, born this day in 1971. And happy birthday to my ex-husband, Juan Diego Flores, born this day in Lima. Your cake is in the mail.
And that's your 2-minute drill.
We all know what Juan Diego Flores sounds like, so I thought we would listen to a bit of the birthday boy, 90 years old now, Renato Bruzon, just a little bit of Nemico della Patria from André Chenier, from a live performance at the Metropolitan, at the Chicago's Lyric Opera of Chicago. Oh, God.
Chicago's Metropolitan Opera.
Thank you. From the Lyric Opera Chicago. Leave it in.
Yeah. The Superior Opera House. No bias whatsoever. I want to talk a little bit about the legacy of Bruce Crawford, the 14th Metropolitan Opera General Director. Not for very long, but I think it's kind of interesting because he's often one, so many leaders of the Met have become kind of household names, but I did have to Google Bruce Crawford. Maybe for Oliver, who was already in his late 60s when Bruce Crawford came to power, has a more direct opinion about him. But certainly, I think the thing he's most known for is sort of being this former ad executive who brought sort of that sort of ethos to the Met at a time when the Met was doing very poorly financially. I mean, one could also say, when isn't the Met doing poorly financially? But this was a rough era. And he was good in some ways in terms of he did encourage not just playing the classics. There's a quote in the New York Times obituary about him where he says, like, if you just play the classics, then you'll get big audiences for 3 or 4 years, then people will stop coming, which is something I agree with. But at the same time, I do think that the national tours for the Met were a massive loss, not necessarily for the Met, but for the country in terms of people's access to opera, especially, once you hit the 90s and early aughts when a lot of regional companies started dropping like flies. I don't know. I don't know if either of you happen to have a different opinion or a stronger opinion about it, but it was kind of interesting looking at this sort of corner of Met history, which I was a little bit less familiar with.
Yeah, I mean, I share your sentiment of, those tours were expensive, but for little boys and gals like you and me, that would have been the only opportunity for us to see something as prestigious as the Met. Something that I came across in reading one of his obituaries was that he was only the second board member in the history of the Met to go on to serve as general manager. So that crossover was just not something that happened very much. And he was a ad executive in his own right. He ran the Omnicom group and suspended his career to go and be the GM at the Met. So again, there are great things that he did. He leaves quite the mark in the Mets history. Not all of it was super supported by everyone. I'm a little bummed about the tour thing, but he also pulled them out of a massive hole, which should be commended.
This is $8 million deficit in 1980s money, too. So, it's pretty rough.
Not that piddly $8 million like it would be today.
Yeah, that's what a dozen eggs cost these days. So.
You've never sounded older, Oliver. Let's talk about the big story this week, which I think we all knew was coming. It came a little sooner than I expected, but the grand leaving of the WNO from the Kennedy Center, they're, of course, citing, cost and just the fact that Kennedy Center doesn't understand how nonprofit performances work, having all the money up front. Yeah, there's, Rick Grinnell has demonstrated, I think, very thoroughly that he doesn't understand nonprofits. But I think there also might be a certain amount of maybe this is just finally what has to be done. Francesca Zambello was floating the idea of leaving really just about a month ago, citing at that time, the fact that no one was coming. Donors were pulling out. Lots of people were saying that as long as his name is on the building, they will not enter it under any circumstances. His name, of course, being Trump. And I think that probably factored into this to a certain degree. And the fact that Rick Grinnell threw his usual temper tantrum maybe indicates that was partially the case.
Yeah, I mean, what better way to show how serious of a person you are and have the right on your side by doing all caps tweets to defend your position. Good job, Dick. Way to go. This is, I had mentioned this to you gentlemen previously, is I've kind of got conflicting feelings about all of this, on one hand, way to stick it to this administration. I'm glad that they're out of there as a shove it. And I appreciate that there are a lot of people that are in full support of this. But on the other hand, they were one of those last big residencies inside the Kennedy Center, which for the record is the people's other house. It was created as a monument to a former president, but it was also created to be this home for our country of the arts. So the only big residency that's left, I think, is the National Symphony, who also just put out their own statement today. And the retreat of one of those big partnerships feels like a retreat and a surrender of this property, this people's house, which I think for a lot of the folks who have been coming in and messing with our stuff is what they wanted. I'm of two minds about this move.
What would get them to go back? I mean, what would have to happen is a new administration, maybe take Trump's name off of it, maybe not, re-establish a bipartisan board, how many years would it take for those circumstances to be feasible even?
I mean, I'd like to think that it could happen just as fast as it went the other way, which has been less than a year at this point.
To be clear, in addition to the new administration there, Britt Grinnell and his lackeys not understanding how non-for-profits work and how opera companies work, we also knew that them being in place was going to affect eventually programming. Eventually they're going to get to their artistic decisions, and that's not sustainable. And Francesca Zambello is a lesbian, and she's a leader of DEI initiatives. Like, she invented DEI initiatives. So she is like public enemy, even though I'm sure they don't know that yet because they're busy, building ballrooms, But what happens now is WNO finds some new venue or new venues in the meantime. And we now more than ever have to support them. We have to just do everything we can to make sure this company gets through this and survives. And, maybe we buy tickets as an industry populace and just so they have the revenue, and give them away if we can't attend,
I get why you're disappointed, Ashlee, but I think that there is a little bit of a glimmer of hope here in that they are removing themselves from under the boot to a certain extent. It's kind of the same opinion I have about this Esther Huang story, who it really seemed like they were going to weaponize an NDA against her. And then thanks to Needleman, they were able to force the Vancouver Symphony Orchestra to reconsider that, which is great because, I have seen many times NDAs being deployed against not just people who've been sexually assaulted, but, people who spoke up about various things. Usually the deal is you get some sort of cash settlement and then you sign something that says if you ever talk about it again, you have to give all the money back and then some, which is a really aggressively corporate way to fight back against people speaking out about all sorts of injustices. And the only way to stop it is to put this kind of pressure on it. And, I don't know if this, like Catherine Needleman said, this is a matter of scrutiny for Vancouver Symphony to make sure that they stick to the promise of not doing this anymore. But hopefully it leads to something better in the future. I
mean, I'm grateful that, when you think about, shame only works on those who still have the ability to feel it, which means that they understand the difference between honor and embarrassment. So it is comforting to know on some level that shaming still works. And there's an organization that either realizes they messed up or are so embarrassed they don't want to admit how badly they messed up. So either way, good call. May Esther find the healing that she needs.
My real question is, does Mary Ann Carter feel shame? That could become very important very soon. During the first Trump administration, she was a stooge, but I guess she didn't kill the agency entirely, which is why I think she's kind of referred to as a moderate by a lot of people talking about this online. But she was part of the Heritage Foundation, so I feel like this might be a Heritage Foundation, but she kind of likes paintings or something. We'll see.
Listeners, my notes, we have a shared doc where we put in notes to get ready for these recordings. And I just put in from Ashlee Hardgrave, Marion Carter sucks. That was all I put into the note there. Here's the thing. This is the pedigree of our new head of the NEA, which, by the way, is going to get tanked during this administration. Before this appointment, she had no experience in the arts. She was a chief policy advisor to Florida Senator Rick Scott when he was governor of the state of Florida. She's the founder and the president of MAC Research, which is a consulting firm that specializes in political and public affairs. Guess which side it's for. And then she was the director of U.S. Senate relations for the Heritage Foundation. The Heritage Foundation, if you don't remember, they are the ones that authored Project 2025, which talks about the dissolvement of several governmental agencies, including the one that she's about to run. So, if you're going to ask me my opinion, it's that Marion Carter sucks.
On that note, let's wrap this show up.
Good call, bad call on Opera Box Score.
Good call, bad call. That's how we end the show. Oliver Camacho.
I've got two good calls. One, Classic FM has hired Sir Bryn Terfel to host a 4-part series, Opera Villains, with Bryn Terfel. The first episode already dropped. If you have access to Classic FM, you can hear Bryn Terfel talk about villains like Scarpia and Mephisto and Sweeney Todd, all from his own experiences. That should be a fun listen. My sports-related good call is the casting of the men's figure skating the Americans that'll be representing the U.S. The casting, yeah.
Good job.
Of course, we knew that the quad god, Ilya Malinin, was going to make the team, and hopefully he will win all the awards. But also making the team, and this is like a really heartbreaking story, and I'm sure we're going to hear it many times during the NBC broadcast.
Oh, yeah.
Maxim Naumov, whose parents died in that plane crash.
Over the Potomac.
So he made the team, and man, just thinking about that, I'm already like, okay, next. Next,
Ashlee Hardgrave.
And a much, much lighter recommendation. If you liked television shows like The Office or mockumentaries or possibly like competitive cheerleading, boy, do I have a recommendation for you. It is the show Stumble that is on Peacock. I believe they're going to start airing episodes on NBC, but the first part of the season is currently available on Peacock. It follows a competitive cheer coach from a junior college who has a mild fall from grace, and she gets the chance to start over. If you remember the show Claws, Jen Lyon was on it. She is the one at the center of this. Stumble on Peacock. It's worth your time.
That is it for this week's edition of America's Talk Radio Show about opera. Make sure you subscribe to the show wherever you get your podcasts. Get your voice heard and find links to stuff we've talked about at our website, operaboxscore.com. That's also where you can put your money where our mouths are. Give back to the OBS using the Support the Team tab. Your announcer is Norm Waddell. Your creative consultant is Oliver Camacho. And your audio editor is Weston Williams. The executive producer of the OBS is George Cedarquist. For co-host Ashlee Hardgrave with guest Caitlin Vincent, I'm Weston Williams, asking you to continue the conversation about opera as you break up with WNO first. We're back with an all-new show next week when we go Inside the Huddle with Heldon tenor Christopher Sokolowski. Plus, you get more opera headlines, more hot takes, and more heart attack-inducing Bears wins. Join us.